Hi guys, welcome back to my channel Medicine Made Easy. Today's video will be the second part of acid-base disorders. In the previous video, we learned how the basic mechanisms maintain the acid-base homeostasis inside our body. And in today's video, we'll be learning about the different types of acid-base disorders. For those of you who couldn't watch the previous video, I will be linking it in the description box. We now know that our body is a pool of acids and bases maintained at a fine balance to maintain our pH in the range of 7.38 to 7.42. So what if the concentration of hydrogen ions inside our body increase? We become acidotic, don't we? We call this as acidosis. And what if the opposite happens and our bicarbonate concentration increases? Our body becomes basic and we call it as alkalosis. We learned that the disruption of any mechanism maintaining the basic homeostasis of acids and bases would lead to acid-base disorder. So how does that happen? To understand that, you need to recap a basic formula that we learned in the previous video. That would be carbon dioxide plus water resulting in carbonic acid or H2CO3, which is unstable and dissociates to hydrogen and bicarbonate ions, and the hydrogen ions will bind itself to a buffer and then gets excreted depending on the body's need. So you can see when you have a lot of carbon dioxide, you will have a lot of carbonic acid leading to a condition of acidosis. So regulation of this carbon dioxide is important and it's done by respiration. So if you have a problem with your respiration leading to carbon dioxide retention, you will become acidotic and this is known as respiratory acidosis. If you have a problem where your carbon dioxide gets washed off, you will have a respiratory alkalosis. Now when you come to this hydrogen, bicarbonate and buffers, they are mainly regulated by the renal, or they are the metabolic components. So when you have a dearrangement of these ions, you will have either a metabolic acidosis or a metabolic alkalosis. So when you have either of these conditions, an acidosis because of respiration or renal, or an alkalosis which could be respiratory or metabolic, what will your body do? Will it just watch and wait? No, it has its own compensatory mechanisms. When the problem is with the respiration, the lungs can't do anything further to correct this condition. So your kidneys will come in it. So you will have a compensatory mechanism initiated by your kidneys. That is known as metabolic compensation. So the opposite happens when you have a problem with your kidney or when you have a metabolic acidosis or alkalosis. Now his friend lungs would come to save these kidneys and our body. So you will have a compensation that would be a respiratory compensation. Let's start with respiratory acidosis. This happens when you have carbon dioxide retention. One good example would be when you have COPD or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, where you retain carbon dioxide. So as a compensatory mechanism to this, your kidneys will try to retain bicarbonate, which will be your metabolic compensation. So in summary, when you have respiratory acidosis, you have low pH and high CO2 and bicarbonate ion concentration. When you move on to respiratory alkalosis, this happens mainly when you have carbon dioxide washout. One good example would be hyperventilation. As a response to this, your kidneys will try to excrete bicarbonate ions more and more. So in summary, you will have a high pH with low bicarbonate and carbon dioxide concentration. Now you can see that I have included only one example here for each of the conditions, respiratory acidosis and alkalosis. But when you search in the internet, you can find huge lists of causes for these conditions. Since this video is basically to teach you the concepts and to make you work out the conditions, I have not included those huge lists. Moving on with metabolic acidosis. It can happen either because of an accumulation of any acid other than carbonic acid or because of primary decrease in plasma bicarbonate ion concentration. Accumulation of any acid can happen when you have increased acid production or decreased excretion. Increased HCl production occurs when you have decreased renal excretion of hydrogen ion occurs in your renal tubular acidosis type 1 and type 4. Okay, wait. Renal tubular acidosis? What are those? Let me give you a quick summary. Renal tubular acidosis can be simply explained as a group of conditions where you have a problem in your nephron in either hydrogen ion excretion or bicarbonate ion reabsorption, leading to metabolic acidosis. Depending on the site where you have the problem, you have 4 main classes. In type 1, you have failed hydrogen ion excretion at the distal convoluted tubule. And in type 2, you have failed bicarbonate ion reabsorption mainly at the proximal convoluted tubule. Your type 3 would be deficiency in carbonic anhydrase type 2 enzyme. And in type 4, you have unresponsiveness to aldosterone. So in type 1 and 4, you have decreased renal excretion of hydrogen ions. When you come to primary decrease in plasma bicarbonate, it is mainly because of loss of bicarbonate ions, either via your kidneys or via your GI or gastrointestinal tract. From kidneys, you lose bicarbonate when you have renal tubular acidosis type 2 or when you have a tubular damage. And from GI tract, you lose bicarbonate when you have diarrhea or when you have an ileostomy. So, these causes of different categories are obviously not limited to 2, though I have put only 2 causes here. I am not going to bore you with huge lists of causes because this video is mainly to teach you the basic concepts and make you understand and work out the different causes and the pathophysiological processes of metabolic and respiratory acidosis and alkalosis. So now we have a metabolic acidotic condition. So who will come to rescue our body? It would be our lungs. Our lungs will try to save our body from this condition. So it needs to make our make our body or push our body towards a basic condition. For that, what will it do? It will try to expel the carbon dioxide from the body to reduce the formation of carbonic acid also. So what will it do? It will hyperventilate to reduce the carbon dioxide concentration to push our body towards a basic condition. So in summary, when you have metabolic acidosis, you will have a low pH and low bicarbonate and low PCO2 or the carbon dioxide concentration. Now we have different types of causes for this metabolic acidosis. How do we know which has contributed for this acidosis? Can we predict it? For this, we need to know about the anion gap. So what's an anion gap? To understand this, we need to understand few other things. We have cations in our body. Those would be sodium, potassium, calcium and magnesium. And anions, mainly bicarbonate and chloride. We also have negatively charged compounds such as albumin, phosphate, sulfate, lactate and other organic acids. The sum of the positive charges and the negative charges in our body should be 0. This is to maintain the electrical neutrality of our body. And the ions which I have shown in red color could be easily measured via laboratory tests. So you can see that you have measured ions that could be measured as well as ions that cannot be measured. So there is a gap of measured anions and the cations. And this gap, and you can also see there are more unmeasured anions than the cations. So we call this gap an anion gap. So because of this, our body has a normal anion gap which would be 12 to 16. Now different conditions of acidosis, mainly metabolic acidosis, result in acids forming negative ions which could be measured or which cannot be measured. So based on this, you have two entities as high anion gap and normal anion gap. Before moving on to that, I would also like to highlight that this albumin is a very important compound because it forms the majority of the negative charge in our body. So you can understand any change in the albumin concentration in our body would affect this anion gap either by increasing or decreasing it. So when you move on to high anion gap acidosis, the two main conditions that we can discuss are diabetic ketoacidosis and lactic acidosis. Again, I am emphasizing that you have a high anion gap when you have more anions that cannot be measured. So in diabetic ketoacidosis, you have ketone bodies. In lactic acidosis, you have lactic acids. These cannot be measured easily, so resulting in a high anion gap. So what about normal anion gap acidosis? You can mention diarrhea, where you lose your bicarbonate ions, leading to acidotic condition, but here you don't produce any anions that cannot be measured. And also increased HCl production. You can see, you can measure the chloride ions. So here you are not producing any anion that cannot be measured. So these two would be good examples for normal anion gap acidosis. Again, I am emphasizing that this list could go on and on, but I am not boring you with those huge lists because this video is to teach the main concepts. Moving on to metabolic alkalosis. It can happen either because of loss of hydrogen ions or because of an increased reabsorption of bicarbonate ions. Now, loss of hydrogen ions can occur via the gastrointestinal tract or via the kidneys. GI loss of hydrogen ions occur mainly in vomiting, and the renal loss occurs when you have primary hyperaldosteronism. Now I hope you remember this diagram from the previous video. I have explained this in detail in the previous video. So what happens in primary hyperaldosteronism? You have lots of aldosterone. Now this aldosterone will positively influence this ATPase, leading to more H+ ion secretion, leading to renal loss. The next would be hypokalemia. When you have low potassium ions in your body, hypokalemia, your body will try to preserve hydrogen and potassium ions. So more potassium will move into the blood. To maintain the electrical neutrality, the more hydrogen ions will be secreted out of the cell to the tubular lumen. So hypokalemia will lead to increased renal loss of hydrogen ions. The next category would be the diuretics. How does a diuretic lead to more renal loss of hydrogen ions? It is via two main mechanisms. The first would be the diuretic induced delivery of more sodium ions into the tubular lumen will lead to more sodium ion influx into the tubular cell and more excretion of more potassium and hydrogen ions out of the cell, as you can see here. And the second mechanism would be diuretics will lead to volume contraction of your vascular compartments. As a result of that, the renin-aldosterone mechanism gets activated and this aldosterone is secreted. It will result in positive influence of the ATPase, leading to more hydrogen ion secretion. Now when you move on to increase reabsorption of bicarbonate, it occurs in hypochloremia when you have less chloride ions. Now how does that happen? You know, for the bicarbonate ion secretion at the beta intercalated cells, you need an anion, mainly chloride, to be exchanged for bicarbonate. When you have hypochloremia, less chloride is filtered at your renal by your glomerulus and less chloride arrives in your renal tubules and in the tubules. So as a result, you have less chloride ions to exchange for the bicarbonate. So your bicarbonate ion secretion will be reduced and more bicarbonate will be reabsorbed into the blood. And the next would be the hypercalcemia. Hypercalcemia will lead to increased bicarbonate reabsorption by acting on the specific channels that absorb bicarbonate. So, when you have metabolic alkalosis, who will come as your savior? It would be your lungs. Your lungs would try to shift this condition towards a more acidotic state to balance out this alkalosis. So what should it do? It should preserve the carbon dioxide, which will form carbonic acid, and which will try to shift this alkalotic condition towards an acidotic condition to make it a balance. So what will your lungs do? It will retain carbon dioxide. So in your metabolic alkalosis, you will have a high pH and a high bicarbonate and PCO2. A final word on the management of acid-base disorders. It's basically correcting the cause. If you correct the cause that led to the relevant acid-base disorder, the disorder would get corrected automatically. So that brings us to the end of today's video. I hope you liked it. If so, please give a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and to click the bell icon to receive updates on future videos. Leave a comment and say what you think, and also mention the topics that you need future videos. So until we meet again, bye bye.